Suicide. A word that dredges up many feelings and thoughts deep from within the human psyche. Feelings of sadness, thoughts of loved ones, and even thoughts of avoiding the topic altogether. While the thoughts or feelings that surface are varied, one thing is certain: it must be prevented. And that's the topic for this episode of our mental health awareness series, Breaking the Silence.
The Love for Lawrence Foundation started at Lawrence's memorial service. We had been through about 7 days of intense grief, and we were, as his friends, coming out of a bit of a stupor with the sobering reality that we were going to be remembering our friend that day. I said something to Vivi Dimmitt, Lawrence's mom, at the memorial, and I said, whenever you're ready, give me a call. We're going to do something because this is not okay. Vivi said, I want to do something. I'm ready. And this was a number of months after losing Lawrence, been in the first year. And she said, Vivi, if you know her, she's ambitious. And she said, I want to change the law. I want to address insurance deficiencies. I want to provide safe spaces. Vivi's vision and her ambition was significant. I'll never forget that conversation. But what happened after that conversation was we came together with some friends, and Vivi had spoken to some advisors, some people that she really respected and who the issue had impacted their lives. And we brought a really beautiful group together. We sat around a boardroom table, and for a couple hours, we had some informed discussion about what was being done from a community and nonprofit standpoint in the mental health space. We told stories of lost loved ones. Our dear friend Marty, who was a catalyst for starting the organization and the initial kind of leader of the board, had lost his daughter as well, Stacy, a former classmate of mine. So it felt good to shed some tears and to laugh, and we could finally tell the stories to Lawrence's parents and sisters that we could never tell. The foundation started as just based only on passion and love. And because there were so many talented people in that room, we were able to channel that passion and love into significant action. And due to the generosity of the Dimmitt family, we had the initial capital to really make some change. So if we could be that push in the mental health world to increase awareness of suicidal ideation and decrease suicidal incidents, then God bless, because that could be the most impactful thing I do in my entire career. I would describe Lawrence's personality as, above all, kind and a true empath. He was a man for others. He was also incredibly goofy. He loved to show everyone a good time, but did not like being the center of attention. Enjoyed competition, and he was competitive in a lot of things. He was very focused when he had an idea that he was set out to accomplish. He would oftentimes, work diligently to accomplish that with no accolades, but he loved to have a good time. And he never wanted the good time to end. He cherished his moments where he could be with friends and family and just enjoy. Lawrence impacted the lives of those around him, namely his friends, family, colleagues, employees, in a major way. Lawrence was a phenomenal connector of people. I think that really linked back to the fact that he was such an empath. But oftentimes Lawrence would throw, a party, or he would, host a work gathering, or you would be invited to something alongside him, and there would be great people around him. He also was a very good listener. I think that if you asked his former employees, they would say absolutely, someone who ran with an open door policy, someone who really cared about the people that he worked with and for. And when it came to friendships, he was the guy that would sit up until late at night, that would come over and help you deal with a really hard problem. You know, I have many instances where Lawrence went above and beyond as a friend, things that to this day I'm not sure I would do. And, you know, he didn't think twice about it. A great story was Lawrence was going to the Bucks game when I was moving in with an ex-girlfriend, and he saw how much stuff I had to move. And Lawrence was dressed for the game. He was doing some corporate entertaining, and he looked at his watch when he saw what I was up to. He said, I've got a little time. He threw some of my old clothes on and helped me move all my furniture. We both got really sweaty. We ordered some food, and he didn't have to do that. He just saw that I was struggling with some things, and I didn't want to ask, but he insisted. And that was just the type of man he was. And sometimes to his detriment. You know, he was a man for others. And I think clearly in that spirit, he lacked some of those same skills as the way he treated himself. Losing Lawrence, I've said, opened my eyes to the world of pain that we are living in. The battles that so many people are facing daily that they don't talk about, that they don't share in it or feel the ability to share in any way. And I just felt like the rug of my life was pulled out from under me, and I was never going to be the same. In opening my eyes and losing Lawrence, I have found almost daily silver linings in the kindness I show to myself, the grace I try to show others, and the compassion that I have for, strangers. It's not an everyday, all the time feeling anymore, but it's always going to come in waves. And I try to remind myself that, everyone is doing the best that they can. I don't know that I'll ever fully recover from losing, a man who I considered a brother. I mean, my parents have always said that, friends are the family we choose. And I grew up with a very close family, and Lawrence was my chosen brother. We're lucky enough to have a couple of them that are all from childhood, and we love each other so much.
Some of the common signs that somebody may be contemplating suicide, first of all, includes talking about suicide.
There's 3 factors to it. There's biological, there's historical, there's psychological.
There are many individuals who may seem very, very depressed up until the moment that they've made the decision, and their affect may change completely. They may be more peaceful. They may be more uplifted. Don't assume that they're just naturally in this quote unquote better place.
Really, with the risk factors and warning signs, it would be more behavioral than anything. Let's say somebody's more down and out, more depressed, or simply agitated, or even more so kind of withdrawn from social interactions.
Make sure you're constantly asking that individual, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Are you thinking about suicide?
Rage. It could come out as rage.
Friends and family members play a key role in keeping an individual who is suicidal safe. So some of the important things that we'd want every family member and friend to do is, certainly if the friend is talking about suicide, ask the question, are you contemplating suicide? How are you feeling today?
One thing they could do is just having a real conversation with them. That's the most important thing, opening up that door of opportunity for them to express their feelings.
For starters, a warning that once you make yourself vulnerable and open to supporting a loved one in this world, others will see that vulnerability and that safety, and you will be approached by others who are also struggling.
Making sure that you have removed any types of lethal means, meaning Does that friend of yours, that family member, have access to a gun? Do they have access to excessive amounts of medication? Making sure that you can keep them as safe as you possibly can.
You might think that you're listening, but really listen. A lot of times people that are struggling the most because they feel like nobody can see them. And that creates loneliness.
Asking, hey, I've noticed that you've been depressed lately. You've been doing this. Are you thinking about suicide?
And understand that when someone's really struggling, everything that they say might not be true or factual. It might be what they're experiencing in their head. But you might be on the receiving end of some harsh words or tones that are not personal. They might be directed at you because you're the closest person to that person, and that you might be experiencing a bit of a lash out.
Be there with a non-judgmental ear and allow them the space to talk. Making sure that if they are talking, allow them to keep talking, don't cut them off, and always have your phone ready, because at any point you might need additional help and support in keeping your family member or friend safe.
Take care of yourself first and foremost. If you have a partner, especially, who is struggling with mental illness, you still have bills to pay. You still have children and or other family members to take care of. But most of all, you need to take care of yourself, because mental illness can kill. And the last thing on the planet that anyone needs is for you to go down with the ship.
Making sure that you know about 988, that is the National Crisis and Suicide Helpline. Making sure that you understand that it's available no matter where you are, and you have access to it if a family member, friend, loved one, colleague is expressing thoughts of suicide.
A few of the effective prevention strategies for suicide for you helping others who are struggling can be having them seek mental health professions, seeking therapy. Using medication can be preventative as well.
Sometimes individuals tell us that the reason why they were contemplating suicide is because they were trying to talk, they tried to get somebody to listen, and nobody would. So making sure that those lines of communication stay open, and again, the key, use that word, use that phrase, are you contemplating suicide? It does so much to connect that individual who's struggling, who believes nobody is seeing them, who believes they are completely alone and nobody understands them. It helps them say, you know what, somebody is recognizing I'm struggling.
The role of mental health professions that play a role in suicide prevention in general really is just exploring their feelings, just kind of talking things through.
Just really encourage people to use the tools that exist. And, you know, especially our first administrator for Love for Lawrence, Stoney, she had multiple kids that struggled. And she was talking to me one day about her son who was diagnosed bipolar. And she said, Ian, there's 3 legs to the stool. Those legs are proper medication, therapy, and self-care. My son's responsible for those 3 legs. I can lead him in the right direction. Only he knows what type of self-care he really needs, and he needs to understand his tools. But if one of those legs on a 3-legged stool isn't there, the stool falls over.
Mental health professionals are key because they are doing screenings at every touch point. So whether that mental health professional is in a school, they're in a community, maybe they're in a faith or a worship location, they're always assessing individuals for suicide.
It's a resource for them to be able to express their feelings and just their thoughts and just their struggles in general.
Do not be afraid to, one, steer your loved one or friend to resources very quickly. There's no shame in a therapeutic relationship. I think everyone should have a therapist. It took me losing Lawrence to understand the importance of therapy, and it took me being in a committed relationship with a loved one who was struggling dearly with her own mental health issues to finally seek a therapeutic relationship myself.
they're also the ones that can help to translate for non-mental health people how to help somebody who is struggling. They can provide the supports, the language, the resources, because that mental health professional is only available during certain times in an individual's life. That individual has so many other people around them, and all of them need to know what to do when their family member or loved one is struggling or is contemplating thoughts of suicide. So that mental health professional can be an amazing teacher or coach to help the other people in that person's life keep them safe.
There are so many ways that the community can get involved in Love for Lawrence mission and in our suicide prevention programs. First of all is attend one of our events or one of our programs, or even host. You could attend or host one of our intimate conversations, attend a lunch and learn webinar.
Individuals live in communities. They are a part of communities. So when communities take steps to educate the population about 988, they take steps to talk about suicide and mental health. They take steps to reduce the stigma and really take steps to make mental health a regular part of the community conversation. All of those things go such a long way in preventing community suicides.
It's such a big taboo in today's society about talking about suicide in general. A lot of people are just kind of, no, that could never happen to me, but they don't understand that it affects other people as well. And it's just one of those things that have been pushed aside for so long that it needs to be brought up to light in the community in general. That's one of the biggest things, is when the community comes together and talk about the real struggles and real difficulties, that suicide is a real thing. That's the first step of being preventative.
My perspective on mental health and suicide prevention has really evolved since starting in my role at Love for Lawrence. I think it's easy for all of us to look at mental health struggles from a distance and have a general understanding of what a large issue it is. And my eyes have really been opened to what a huge issue we have within our community, within our society as a whole.
One of the things, again, that we hear from individuals is that nobody heard me, nobody saw me. I felt completely alone. When communities acknowledge that this is real, suicidal thoughts and ideation are real, and that we're going to, as a community, support individuals, not shun them, not talk them out of their feelings, not tell them you have nothing to be suicidal about, they're going a long way in helping that individual who is at the lowest point in their lives recognize that there is a community that wants them there. There is a community that values their life and wants them to be there tomorrow and next week and next month and next year.
If you are involved in any community organization, your school, your workplace, Love for Lawrence would love to help bring mental health initiatives into that space. And if it is an organization that could use capital, could use help, encourage them to apply for our grant cycle.
Some of the factors that contribute to suicidal thoughts and behaviors include such things as a situational experience. Maybe a trauma has happened or some significant life event that has left an individual feeling so overwhelmed they don't know how to move forward.
Suicide is very complex. There are risk factors that play into it, such as biological, historical, or even psychological. So specifically when it comes to biological, it could be from genetics.
It could certainly be psychological. An individual already has an underlying mental health issue or a substance use issue that has gotten to a cresting point that they, again, feel like there are no other options but suicide.
You know, family history of depression. With behavioral, it could just be from past traumas.
And then certainly environmental. What is happening in a community? What is happening in somebody's physical or environment? We certainly know during COVID, individuals who were isolated felt very much alone and unfortunately oftentimes contemplated thoughts of suicide because the environment around them did not allow them to utilize their self-care plans, which could oftentimes be being with other people, being out in the community.
And then even psychological, it could be, the simple thing as just seeing things in a negative viewpoint that can lead to that.
We can create a much more open dialogue about suicide simply by talking about it. There's been this myth forever that if you mention the S word of suicide, you're suddenly going to plant this idea in somebody's head. That is the biggest urban myth that we've ever populated. Suicide is one of those states of being where you really feel like nobody sees you. You're very isolated and you're very alone. And so for us as a community, again, to have conversations and to utilize that word suicide, it makes it part of the normal everyday conversation.
It's letting people know that you're okay to talk to them about it, having a comfortable, real conversation with them. If you think it in the light of physical health, everybody deals with physical health. We have to think about mental health as the same as physical health. You go day to day, making sure that you're healthy, that you're fit, or just eating clean. We have to treat mental health the same way we treat physical health.
For so long, things like prostate cancer and breast cancer were never talked about. And so now that they are part of the regular vernacular, people are getting screened, people are getting tested. When we get to a place where suicide is spoken of and it is assessed the same way we assess for blood pressure and prostate screenings, all of those things, we will see a reduction in suicide. It moves it out of the dark and brings those feelings into the light.
A few misconceptions about suicide that need to be addressed is a lot of times when people bring up the word suicide, they feel like it could be a contributing factor to someone who will go with more having suicidal thoughts. When you simply ask the question, are you thinking about suicide? It really opens that door of opportunity to let the person who's struggling know, hey, someone wants to have a conversation with me and somebody cares about me.
If you say the word suicide, you're going to magically plant this idea in somebody's head. That has been populated and perpetuated for decades. One of the research tells us that the most important thing we can do is utilize that word suicide when asking somebody how they're doing. And at the Crisis Center, we talk a lot to individuals that are trying to figure out, how do I have that tough conversation? Because I don't want to make things worse, or I don't want to feed into, somebody's asking for attention. First of all, if somebody's saying suicide, give them that attention. Don't assume that they are just doing it for some sort of nefarious reason. They're in a really bad place. Treat that with the respect that it deserves.
So that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is when you bring up the topic of suicide, that people will continue to go down that path. But really, in most cases, it's an opportunity to realize that they are important to somebody and they're not alone.
Ask the question, how are you doing? Are you thinking about suicide? And I will promise you, about 8.5 times out of 10, somebody will push back, I'm fine. The important thing is to push back on them and say, you know what? I know you. I know what fine looks like for you, and this is not it. I'm here and I'm worried about you. How are you feeling? Are you thinking about suicide? And shut your mouth. Give them a chance to take a breath and to actually be able to get their thoughts together, because it's the first time anybody's ever been real with them, more than likely. And then let them speak. And you will be surprised at how doing those simple things, a community that adopts such a simple method of talking to somebody, how much that really impacts and reduces the rates of suicide in community.
Resources like the crisis hotline are pretty effective. We have different resources that those who are struggling or those who have loved ones who are struggling can contact for immediate help. For example, we do have our National Suicide Prevention Hotline that they can call. Anyone can call. It's 1-800-273-TALK, so 8255.
Particularly numbers like 988 have already shown that 97% of the time an individual will, once they call, that they will not need additional resources and supports from the acute setting, meaning that when somebody calls in, they have an opportunity, when somebody calls those lines, they have an opportunity to connect to another human whose sole job is to listen and to believe what you're saying. And 97% of the time, that's what people need. They just need to be heard. Those other 3%, those are individuals that do need an active rescue, and that certainly is available.
They can also, if somebody's in immediate danger or it's self-harming, they could also text the crisis hotline to 988. Essentially, it's like the 911, but for suicide prevention. We've been advocating for that on National Hill and the Capitol to really push for that. And then if somebody is not comfortable talking to someone over the phone, they can simply text the word talk to the crisis hotline 741-741.
But we tell anybody out there, whether it's they're struggling themselves or it's a family member or friend, the best thing you can do is call 988, get connected with somebody who can walk an individual through a process. I promise you, they're going to feel better, and it's going to get them to the other side of better, whatever that looks like for them.
Social media has a huge role. Obviously, a lot of people are connected with a lot of people around the world. And one of the things that if you notice somebody who's struggling, making certain comments like, I'm just so depressed, or I feel like a burden, that's one of those key factors that if somebody notices a sign of struggle like that, social media, has such a big outreach that you can seek help, but also be the provider of helping and just having a simple conversation with people.
Social media is this amazing vehicle that can be utilized for incredible things and for very destructive things. So certainly on social media, we have all witnessed individuals who have utilized social media in suicide prevention activities, trying to bring awareness about suicide. But we've also seen the opposite happen, where social media has been weaponized and has, created scenarios that individuals don't feel supported, and they don't feel like the community cares about them, and they don't feel like they're worthy or they're good enough.
It's been more prevalent for people to be able to know that they can seek help online socially, especially, during the times of COVID, that's all we had was social media. And it was such a huge factor that, we as human beings are such social people, and we were just kind of confined to our houses, that social media played a big role. And one of the things that people do is just staying connected, reaching out to somebody, just a simple hello, how are you doing? Hey, I'm thinking of you, you matter to me.
I would say that social media companies, along with individuals using the social media, have a responsibility to create environments in social media that support people, not tear them down.
There are different types of therapy that help with those who struggle or have suicidal thoughts. There's not any particular one that works specifically for all, but just reaching out to a mental health licensed counselor is just the first step they need to take.
Therapeutic interventions for individuals who are struggling with thoughts of suicide can vary, and it really varies depending upon what's going on with the individual. Has the individual experienced some significant trauma that is resulting in their suicidal thoughts? That type of mental health treatment, that type of therapeutic intervention is very specific. If an individual is having suicidal thoughts because of a situation that is happening, maybe within their relationship with their loved one, a spouse, that's a very different type of therapy as well. So it really does vary individual by individual, but I will promise that if anybody is struggling, by calling a number like 988, an assessment can actually happen, and it can guide an individual into which therapeutic modality is going to be best for them.
If someone is struggling and they're afraid to reach out, the one resource that's close by to them is reaching out to family and friends. Again, you don't need to be a licensed, mental health counselor. Just simply talking to someone you trust can make a huge difference.
If somebody is suicidal, but they don't want to call maybe 988, there are so many other ways that an individual can get help. First and foremost, go to somebody you trust, a family member, a friend, maybe a faith leader. If you're involved in the arts or in sports, going to somebody within those realms and just talking to them, having a conversation. You also may want to engage in one of the chat features that are available through 988. 988, again, is the National Suicide and Crisis Hotline. They do have chat functions, so those are available too to anybody 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
If someone's suspecting that a loved one is at immediate risk of suicide, would just having a simple conversation with them, just having, certain phrases as, hey, I've noticed that you've been struggling lately. Hey, I noticed that you're not into sports like you used to be. I'm just wondering, because this is normally not like you, is there something wrong? Or just directly asking the question, hey, are you thinking about suicide?
If somebody is at immediate risk of suicide, either because they've told you that they've already started the suicidal process, maybe they ingested some drugs, or they have done something that is putting their body in harm's way, you must call 911 immediately. Don't second guess it. Don't try to make excuses. Call 911. You always want to err on the side of caution versus anything else, because our goal always is to keep somebody alive.
Anyone who is helping a loved one through issues likely needs to take care of themselves with therapy as well, because otherwise it really can wear on you. And that stigma especially around therapy, is debilitating. And I experience it in my family with an unwillingness to pursue therapy. I have experienced it with employees of mine who quietly struggle, and it diminishes their ability to, act at work. And I've experienced it with friends, even friends who are very close to the subject matter, who are very close with Lawrence, who still will not allow themselves to pursue a therapist and a relationship with that aspect of their psyche. So I would just really encourage people to use the tools that exist.
Making sure that you're having conversations with that family member or friend, asking the question, are you suicidal? Giving them space to talk, and always make sure you have some sort of phone near you so that if it gets beyond what you can do to help somebody, you can either call 988 or 911 immediately for additional help and support.
It's very important to involve family in the treatment process because it takes a village to help someone out. Obviously, families should be a big contributing factor to helping those who are struggling, and just building that trust and bond within families so that way they can know that they're not alone.
So family members can be key in helping to keep a loved one safe by removing any kind of lethal means. They can also be that support to them, making sure that they are offering opportunities for self-care and for support. They're also the ones oftentimes to make sure an individual is staying on their treatment plans, making sure that loved one is taking prescribed medication as prescribed if that is happening, making sure they get to their therapeutic service if needed. All of those things are important within family structures. However, not everybody is lucky enough to live with a family that is supportive. So whether that family is of blood or by choice, making sure that whomever it is that individual is closest to, that they can be supportive of their treatment. And if that family or that group cannot, it's really going to be important for other social supports to be identified. Because anybody who's struggling with thoughts of suicide, they need a tribe. They need a tribe of people who are there to support them throughout their journey of moving from suicidal to wellness.
Some long-term strategies in supporting somebody who's had a suicide attempt really is just keeping them accountable, having the conversation with them, keeping touch and base with them, asking how they're doing, and just kind of making sure that they're not looking for the signs and symptoms if somebody were to go back to struggling.
There are so many long-term strategies. Again, lethal means safety is always number one, particularly if somebody has attempted suicide in the past, making sure that you remove any type of lethal means that's easily accessible. One of the things that research has taught us is that oftentimes suicide is an impulse. It's an impulse that where somebody is right now versus something that is more premeditated. So if it's an impulsive situation, you want to remove that lethal means. And you also want to make sure that there are other supports available to that individual. Safety planning is so very critical post a suicidal attempt, so that an individual knows, first of all, to recognize when they are about to experience suicidal thoughts. And there's oftentimes triggers, there's oftentimes physiological signs that an individual needs to be aware of. And then they need to have a plan to know what to do. What do I do when I start feeling this way? Maybe I do some deep breathing exercises. Maybe I go for a walk. Maybe I start coloring or engaging in some sort of art or music that takes me back to a happier place. That self-care in that moment is so important to lift the spirit, to lift that sense of depression, that sense of isolation and loneliness, and help to get you to the other side of that feeling in that moment in time. Having people available to that individual to call in that moment, whether it's 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, whether it's a text message or it's a phone call or it's smoke signals, whatever it is, for that person to know that in that moment in time, they're not alone.
I'm personally motivated to promote suicide prevention within my role at Love for Lawrence because of personal experiences, right? All of us, I've had personal loss. I've had personal struggles with mental health. Many people that I love have had struggles with mental health, and it's universal, right? We're all touched by mental health issues. There's no discrimination when it comes to mental health issues and suicidal ideation, and that is a huge driver. And another motivator for me really is the loss of Lawrence also. It's to see such a profound loss be turned into action, from heartbreak into hope. That tragedy into action is really incredible. The love that Lawrence's family and friends have from him is palpable. There's no denying that man was very loved. And so I'm inspired to really by the Dimmitt family and by all of Lawrence's friends to make change in his honor, in his memory. And that's a huge motivator for me.
As stated earlier, the stigma around mental health issues is reducing, but we must all do our part to continue this trend. Help others around you feel seen and listened to. Stand up for those around you who are unable to help themselves or who aren't receiving the help they need. Don't just be a friend, be an ally.